guys, Nike here, and I'm happy to present you with my updated guide for the Banner Warrior for PvE raids. It's been a while since my last build update, and there have actually been some changes to the build, so I felt it was definitely time to make it for you guys. So what is the Banner Warrior? Many veterans will roll their eyes at that question because this has been basically some variation of this has been a staple in Guild Wars 2 since before even raids. But with lots of new players coming into Guild Wars 2, they might wonder what this build is and why every raid group wants one. So essentially, the Banner Warrior is a DPS support hybrid that gives up a little bit of damage to bring enormously powerful raid-wide team buffs. When the Warrior's banner buffs are taken into consideration, the Warrior brings inordinately high value to any raid comp. And despite such awesome support, the Warrior itself does just a little bit below top tier DPS. And in fact, there are some bosses that are so favorable to the Warrior that you can compete with or even beat DPS players in those particular encounters. So what I'm going to do, guys, is break up this guide into different sections: gear, traits, skills, usage, and rotation. And by the end, I hope you are prepared and excited to play the build. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so first up is gear. This build uses a mix of Berserker and Assassin's gear, with the exactly optimal spread being full Berserker on every piece except for an Assassin's back piece and one Assassin's ring. All the rest Berserker. I know quite a few players out there just run full Berserker and they don't bother with the Assassin's mix, and that's fine, but let me explain the benefit of running the optimal mix. For Warrior, your axe crits will give you double adrenaline based on one of the traits that we're going to be taking. So you want to make sure that you crit with every hit, and it is necessary to ensure that your rotation doesn't mess up. For most other builds in the game, a non-crit here or there sucks and costs you a little bit of DPS, but it isn't the end of the world. For Warrior, however, a non-crit delays your entire rotation and can cost you a significant amount of DPS, and also just totally throw off your rhythm. So yes, it is a bit more effort to re-gear to crit cap on Warrior, but I assure you that it is 100% worth it to get to 100% crit chance on this build. As far as runes go, we are going to be using Superior Rune of the Thief. This is the highest DPS option when you are able to flank, and frankly that shouldn't be a problem on most bosses. That said, there are a handful of bosses where flanking isn't possible or isn't really practical, and in those situations, you can run Superior Rune of the Eagle. You will need some additional precision pieces for your Eagle set, and that can be a headache if you're not well equipped with legendary gear. Alternatively, you can run Condi Warrior on those bosses if that playstyle is your jam. Personally, the only boss that I find Condi Warrior superior on, outright superior, is the Largos twins. And then secondary to that is Mersat Overseer, because some groups expect the Warrior to play Condi to cleave the Jades, but most pugs are not going to expect that, so you can just play power there. So really, with that said, I don't really recommend Condi Warrior in this guide, and I'm not going to be doing a guide on Condi Warrior just because it's too minor of a build at this point, unless you really enjoy the playstyle, in which case it's totally viable and go ahead and play it. But again, for bosses like Sabbatha where you can't flank, go ahead and run with Eagle runes and then add a few pieces of more Assassin's gear into the mix and you'll be optimal, and you can go to the Snowcrow's website and see what the optimal mix with Eagle runes is on their gear optimizer tool. And with that said, you can even choose to just continue to run Thief runes and not be able to flank, and just accept that your DPS on Sabbatha will be a couple thousand lower. And you know what? You're at that point, you're probably pugging, and it probably really doesn't matter really to your group's success one way or the other, and you can get away with just running Thief gear. And I know that's especially important for players with a limited budget and not a lot of total gear options, so I totally get it. As far as weapons go, we are going to be running Axe exclusively and they'll be in an offset configuration like you can see on my hero panel. and I'll explain the offset thing in a bit. But first, for sigils, we're going to use Sigil of Force and Sigil of Impact as our two highest DPS sigils. Additionally, I highly recommend owning a mace with Paralyzation Sigil. The mace with Paralyzation Sigil will come in handy for any boss with high CC requirements, and specifically Samurog. Groups will expect you to carry CC on Samurog, so bringing a mace on swap with Paralyzation Sigil will allow you to meet your group's expectations. Additionally, you can just find yourself in the type of pug group that struggles with CC on any boss with a break bar, and in situations like that, you're better off just equipping the mace and getting through it and getting your kill than trying to ignore the problem. However, please note, when you have the mace on your swap set, you obviously cannot run the axes offset. So why do we run the axes offset? As you'll see in the rotation, we have a trait which gives us adrenaline on weapon swap. When you run the axes offset like this, you don't technically have a weapon swap, but you can still perform it and gain the benefit of the adrenaline on weapon swap. And that, of course, will become a very important part of our rotation, as I said, and we will discuss how that works when we get to the rotation section below. Moving on to traits, we are going to take, for our specializations, Strength, Discipline, and Berserker. In Strength, we take Peak Performance, Great Fortitude, and Berserker's Power. Essentially, these traits are all DPS increasing traits. Great Fortitude was buffed in this recent patch to give 10% of power as extra ferocity. And that is quite a bit more bonus stats than Forceful Greatsword works for us, especially since we're not a Greatsword build. As an added bonus to Great Vitality, you get a percentage of your power as extra vitality, which works out to be about an extra 2,000 life, which is never a bad thing to have in a build. In Discipline, we are going to take Warrior Sprint, Double Standards, and Axe Mastery. Warrior Sprint is pretty much just a nice DPS increase, and it actually did get buffed from 7 to 10% in the recent patch, which is nice. Double Standards did get nerfed quite a bit. We lost about 50 stats of precision, 50 power, 50 ferocity. However, it is still 100% necessary to take because it makes your banners affect 10 players, which is key for raids. And then Axe Mastery gives us a lot of stats, which is great, but more importantly even than the stats is that we gain bonus adrenaline when we crit. As I discussed before, adrenaline on crit along with the adrenaline on swap trait, which is Versatile Rage, is going to be all important for executing our DPS rotation on time and properly. In Berserker, we take Smash Brawler, Blood Reaction, and Bloody Roar. Bloody Roar and Blood Reaction are just simple DPS increases. They either give you percent damage or extra ferocity. Smash Brawler, however, is where things get interesting. It makes your Berserk last 5 seconds longer, which is critical for our DPS because we gain so much benefit from being in Berserk that you definitely want to be in Berserk as long as possible. Smash Brawler is actually better, in fact, than it seems at 5 seconds because of Smash Brawler. It allows us to cast our heal skill, Blood Reckoning, twice for every Berserk mode, which means we get an additional 2 seconds to Berserk duration. So in a sense, Smash Brawler is actually giving us 7 seconds of more Berserk uptime per Berserk, which amounts to quite a bit more DPS for the build. So really that's it for traits, guys, and we'll talk a little bit about our skill bar now. For skills, we are going to bring Blood Reckoning, as I mentioned, Signet of Might, Banner of Discipline, and Banner of Strength, and our elite skill is Headbutt. Now, Signet of Might is totally optional, and you can and should swap this out for another utility skill if your group's success depends on it. A very common swap out you will see will be at Samurag, where people, again, like I mentioned before, need additional CC, and they will swap it to Wild Blow in order to meet their group's CC expectations. Totally reasonable to do there. You definitely want to, while you're thinking about your gameplay, make sure you have 100% uptime on your banners during times where the boss is vulnerable. The way to do that is to remember that picking up your banners reduces their cooldown so that they can be recast. So essentially, anytime that you have a break in the damage, like let's say the boss has phases, or the boss goes invulnerable, or there's like a phase where you have to kill adds, you can pick up the banners, and then right before the boss becomes vulnerable again, drop them so that they're fresh. This ensures that your banners will always be up 100% of the time when the boss is vulnerable, and you'll be maximizing your group DPS. It is astonishing how many people kind of just fire and forget their banners, and they don't take these situations into account, and they'll have times where they don't have very good alacrity uptime, and simply put, they won't have 100% banner uptime. And this is a way that just your average run-of-the-mill garden variety pug warrior can be bettered by a warrior who is more valuable to his group by using their brain and making sure that their banners are being picked up and dropped and picked up and moved and all of that to be where they need to be when they need to be. If you have a particular encounter where you have some trashy pug warrior and he only has banners up for 80% of the time when the boss is vulnerable, and you can come in and make sure that you have the banners up 100% of the time with just superior placement and timing, what you'll find is your group is going to do a ton more DPS, and you're going to be way more valuable to the team. And so it's little things like that that separate average warriors from good warriors. And you always want to be focused on learning the fights. That way you can find these little edges and take true mastery of the class and not just be there as a warm body. And then lastly, let's talk a bit about Headbutt. Headbutt is used for two purposes. We use it at the beginning of our rotation at the start of a fight to fully charge our endurance, or not our endurance, our adrenaline, so that we can go right into Berserk and start getting crazy. And then periodically throughout the fight, as CC is needed, we use it as a very powerful CC. One last note for Headbutt is it is a stun breaker. So there are times where you could get hit by a boss attack and be stunned or disabled for like 5 seconds. In situations like that, you want to use Headbutt as a stun break so that you can get back into the action and not either be a sitting duck to be put in downstate or just simply to keep your DPS going. You definitely want to consider that with the Headbutt there. So before we get into the rotation, I definitely want to explain how adrenaline works with Berserk. Essentially, it takes 6 hits to charge your adrenaline for a burst skill when you're in Berserk, and the burst skill that we use is Decapitate. However, since we get double adrenaline on crit from our axe, we get a Decapitate every 3 hits. The important thing to remember is that you want to do 3 hits followed by a Decapitate, 3 hits followed by a Decapitate, always. You never want to be in a situation where you're doing 4 hits followed by a Decapitate or 5 hits followed by a Decapitate. You always want to do 3 Decapitate, 3 Decapitate. The reason is Decapitate is simply put our highest DPS skill, and we can only use it while we're in Berserk, and we're only in Berserk for a limited amount of time. So the more Decapitates you get per Berserk, the higher your damage is going to be, and that is the rule. So there are several different combos that you can get that will get you 3 hits efficiently. And learning the different combos and committing them to muscle memory is going to be very important for mastery of the build, because there will be times when you maybe have a non-crit because the Fury in your sub squad dropped, or the alacrity drops and your skills aren't off cooldown at the right time, and you're forced to improvise, and it can throw off the scripted rotation that you have. And once your rotation is thrown off, then it becomes important to be able to improvise. And improvise means glancing at your skill bar. You don't want a tunnel vision, but glancing at your skill bar, seeing what's off cooldown, and then mentally putting together combos, and not just going, what's off cooldown? Okay, I'll press that. But being able to look ahead. You might say, okay, I'm going to use double strike followed by throw axe, and then you should know that you're going to have cyclone axe followed by throw axe right afterwards. And you can kind of think ahead, and then you'll know that you can do one auto attack and then a weapon swap to get you to where you need to be for another decapitate. But you start looking ahead. That way you're never in a situation where you don't know how you're going to get your next decapitate. I'm kind of making it sound more complicated than it is, but you can honestly tell when you're in a pug and you have a warrior who knows all the different ways to get efficient decapitates, and the ones who are kind of just mashing buttons, because even though the fury and alacrity dropping off or whatever are going to make your rotation worse and make your DPS worse, the warriors who can do it efficiently and know what they're doing are going to have higher damage than ones who are just mashing buttons. And again, warrior, and especially the banner warrior, is one of these builds that has a very high skill floor. You can get pretty far just dropping your banners on cooldown and mashing your buttons. That'll get you a decent leeway far in most groups. However, if you take it to the next level and you min-max these things and you learn the different combos to get the adrenaline, you'll go pretty far and you'll do a lot better damage. And you'll notice that you'll start out DPSing some of the DPS players. And you can always kind of pat yourself on the back as a warrior player when you out DPS the DPS players, because it means you're good at your job and you've done the things you need to do. So anyway, guys, enough said about the skill usage here. Let's go into the rotation. So what I'm going to do for the rotation is I am going to show the rotation in slow motion, and I will break down the opening and the skill order that you do in Berserk. And then after I break it down in slow-mo, I'll show it at normal speed so you can kind of see it in action. This is the way I recommend learning all rotations in Guild Wars 2, whether it be a build video that I put out or even one of the Snow Crow's rotation videos. Watch them in slow motion. And make it as slow as you need to make it to sort of see the skill order being pressed. That way you can learn it in small chunks. You can learn the first 3 seconds of the rotation. And once you have that down, you can learn the next 3 seconds. And once you have that down, you can go so on and so forth until you have the rotation down. But I think it's super important to see it and learn it in slow-mo first. So that's what I'm going to do for you guys. And then once that's over, I'll show you the DPS rotation at full speed. And you can see how it works. And hopefully that will be a huge help to all of you guys watching this video. All right, just a moment. Let's go check out the rotation. All right, so the rotation begins. Remember, you are going to flank the golem from behind. You can also, flanking also is from the sides, and it's pretty generous. The area where you're not flanking is pretty small. So we're going to start with headbutt. The point of headbutt, as I described before, is to charge our adrenaline, but it is how we'll engage basically every fight. We will immediately go into Berserk as soon as we can, and then as soon as we can, decapitate. Then Blood Reckoning to do another immediate decapitate, followed by Whirling Axe. You are going to continue to you can use the Whirling Axe to recuperate and then immediately decapitate then double strike, throw axe, which will give us another decapitate, then cyclone axe, and a throw axe to give us a decapitate. Now we do one auto attack and a weapon swap to give us another decapitate. At this point, we have to do autos, so we're going to do a strike and then double strike, or chop and double chop, decapitate, and then cyclone axe and an auto attack, decapitate, and then we are going to have throw axe and double strike ready, and then decapitate, and then we are going to have whirling axe back, so we will launch another whirling axe at the boss, and then decapitate, and blood reckoning should be off cooldown if you have good alacrity, so you get yet another decapitate, and as you can see, then we do cyclone axe and an auto attack and decapitate, another auto attack and a weapon swap to give us the decapitate, and then throw axe and double strike for another decapitate. And at this point, our berserk mode will end and we will have done 14 decapitates. That is the goal of every berserk mode, is to do 14 decapitates. So if you've done that many, you have done it right, and that is the rotation that you guys want to learn. Alright guys, that about wraps up the guide, and I hope it is sufficient and useful for everyone to get you going in raids on a banner warrior in the current meta. Lastly, I just want to shill a little bit and ask you guys to follow me on Twitch and Twitter and all that, and also join the Hard Stuck Discord to participate in that community, whether you're in the guild or not. Even if you're not in the Hard Stuck guild, with a lot of the community streamers and content creators, you can still join the Discord to be part of the community, join in the events, join in the theory crafting and the build in the profession forums, and just to basically figure out what's going on in Guild Wars 2. Links to all that stuff is below in the description. If you have any questions or comments about this video, please leave them below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching, guys.